Hey everybody, if you have seen the Transport Evolved channel, you'll know that we have recently, I say recently, middle of the year, switched from having a production facility outside of my house to one in my house, which means that now the new Transport Evolved studio, this is the green screen where we record TEN, and this is the chair and the iMac where we record our daily shows. This is essentially where everything is recorded now. We've got acoustic treatment on the walls, and we've got the functioning iMac, which has a functioning internet connection. This is where everything's produced. And we take the camera footage off of the SSDs that are on here, and the audio recorders, which are in the other room because I just finished an interview. And then we take them through to where Transport Evolved is edited, which at the moment is down the corridor into this room here, which is a bit of a mess because he just finished recording a video. Let me give you some natural light. This is where the editing begins and ends. All of the footage comes in. This is something I'm working on right now for the holidays. There was a problem with the internet connection. Do not panic, I will reconnect. And that's just me telling the guest, you know, if there's an internet problem, I didn't queue it up. That sounded like I did that on purpose. It's not, but sometimes living out here in rural Oregon, we have a really bad internet connection. But all of the footage that we have, that we've ever created, goes to our server. Now we have a server. That server is called Kennedy. The Kennedy server used to live in the main Transport Evolved studio area, but now it lives here in the server room. And if you watch the channel and you watch some of the things that I've been working on over the years, you'll know that we've just recently upgraded our system with a Ubiquiti server. We did start video recording at the weekend, and then I kind of got excited and it ran away. So I figured, why not? Let's give you a tour of the server closet. And that also means that I get to talk in a room with a very large, noisy fan. So we may have to do some post-production of the audio to make this sound better. If it sounds terrible, you now know why. So let's look at the server. Traditionally, we used to have a setup in this room where we had this, which is Kennedy. That's the main Transport Evolved server. And then underneath it is Yoda. Yoda is our family server. That's where we store all of our, Plex and our virtualization. We've got backups of all of our games on there, family photos, things like that. It's connected on a separate network. Don't worry, we'll come to that in a second. And inside this server cabinet is where we used to have all of those servers. Now, this used to be a complete and utter mess. It really did. Now it's nice and tidy. We've got nice routed cables everywhere. And at the head of the network, we used to have this thing. This is an Omnia Turris. This used to be the head of our network. It struggled and it kept dropping the internet connection, which is why in that recorded video back there, you heard me say, if the connection drops, don't worry, we'll reconnect you. This is fine for a home connection. It's a really good piece of kit. It's an open source router. I still recommend it. It has SPF Plus ports. It has support for a PCI Express internal cards. So we have a 4G LTE modem inside this. And we had got two connections coming into it. The 4G LTE connection, which was our backup connection. And we also had the cable coming in from our wireless Wi-Fi provider. I should point out here that we live in rural Oregon. There is no cable ISP up here. We're up a mountain, or halfway up a mountain. We could get ADSL through the phone line, but the fastest connection we could get was going to be 256K, which is ridiculous. So we are relying on a local internet provider who has Wi-Fi access points and beams the signal up the valley through long distance access points. And we're paying $350 a month for a 20 megabit down and 20 megabit up service. And the 4G LTE is our backup service, because sometimes that Wi-Fi system goes down if one of the farms that it has a base station is at has a power cut or there's a glitch. While they do have backup power, sometimes it takes a few minutes for the connection to come back. But ultimately, we want to have Starlink. Now, we live in an area that Starlink is going to be serving very soon. We've signed up for the Starlink beta, and we're just waiting for Starlink to actually send us an email and go, pay us $499 and then $100 a month, and we'll give you Starlink access. We don't have that yet, but we've done some preparation. And that preparation is where we are at right now. So this is a Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro. We purchased it the other day for the purposes of using for the network. We've got our 2 internet connections coming in here. So the 4G LTE modem in the old access point that we used to use for the house, the Omnia Touris, we've rebooted that, reflashed the firmware, and we're only using the 4G LTE connection. That is a backup connection. It's coming here into this SPF Plus port. Our main, no it's not, I told a lie. Our main internet connection, that's the SPF Plus port that it's coming into, one of these two. And the wireless signal from our very expensive but generally pretty reliable ISP comes in here. The reason why we purchased this UDM Pro is it allows us to have 2 internet connections and failover. It also allows for us to have a hard drive, so we can have a camera system, and this will record all of our camera connections. Now, unlike most proprietary camera systems on the internet, or that you can buy online, the Unify system, the Protect system, doesn't store any of your information in the cloud. You get to store all of your recordings here, and ultimately we're going to put some more Unify cameras around the house, or we are going to put some Unify cameras around the house. We do have some at the moment, but the rest are basically Raspberry Pis and hacked together stuff. Next to this, we've got our 48 port PoE Pro Switch. I can't remember the official name for it. I think it's like the Switch Pro, and it's the 48 port version, and it's got PoE, Power over Ethernet. Power over Ethernet is very important because it allows you to provide data and power to any device just using a standard Ethernet cable. And if you see here, we have a lot of Ethernet cables. We have, originally when we bought the house, we put in about 28 patch bays throughout the house. Now I think there's nearer to 30 plus coming down, because these are extra ones. So these 2 here, for example, these black cables are ones I put in. They might not be those ones, they might be these ones. 2 of these black cables are ones that I put in out to the chicken coop, where we have a Raspberry Pi that also has a security system running on it. But we also now have an access point outside, which is really important because when Transport Evolved needs to stream from our project car, the Honda Insight, that connection is going to broadcast our Wi-Fi to the garden so that we can actually pick up a decent Wi-Fi signal. And hopefully once we get Starlink, if we get Starlink, we'll be able to live stream at up to 40 megabits per second, which will be perfectly fine. And yes, we're planning on keeping our old network. It's basically going to be the failover for the Starlink. And I know it's expensive, but it is technically the business owned. So all of this is business owned pretty much, with the exception of that bottom rack there, which is a personal thing. This is our patch bay that we had installed, or we installed this when we bought the house, and I've just rewired it at the weekend and brought it from the back of the server closet to the front, which makes it easier to plug everything in. And everything that's orange is up to 1 gigabit per second. Some of these are PoE enabled, so the lights tell you some are PoE enabled and some are just regular Ethernet sockets. But that is everything coming in. And you'll notice that we've got things that are missing. So some of these ports are missing plugs, and that's because I wanted to make sure that the number on here corresponded to the number on here, just to make it simple. You'll notice here that there are some things plugged in to the UDM Pro directly. All of these 3 cables here go to servers that are in the rack. So they don't go out of the server closet. And because of that, they don't have a corresponding patch bay. So they're plugged in here. And we've got space for 5 more devices. Not that we're ever going to need that. Then we've got this. This rack here is the 10 gigabit per second rack, switch even. This is the switch for 10 gigabit per second. And it allows us to communicate between this server and the edit machine at 10 gigabit per second, which when you're dealing with ProRes files is super important. This does slide out. I'm not going to slide it out. It's on rails. When this slides out, obviously I can access it and put more drives in. This is a 45 drive server. They did us a little custom front plate on here. We actually made a video on it, so I will maybe link to that in the description below. And that means that we can expand our production. Every time we need to add more drives, we literally open this up and we put 5 drives in at a time. We've currently got 150 terabytes in there, but this can probably take up to about 450 terabytes, half a petabyte maybe, depending on the drives you put in. Right now, this system has been really flawless. It's been in and running for a couple of days. We still have to do some configuration for it. The next thing we need to do is provide some cooling, because this house, unfortunately, this room is on the hot side of the house. In the summer, we get a lot of heat here, and this room gets super hot. We don't actually provide any heating in the winter upstairs, because, as you can see, that's 25 degrees Celsius. It's exhausting the heat here, and at the bottom it's drawing cold air in, which is at 22 degrees Celsius. The other thing we did is we put a new Wi-Fi access point. This is a Nano HD in the ceiling, and there's going to be one downstairs as well. So there you have it. That is everything that's going on at the house in terms of rewiring and preparing. We've got the other Nano HD, which is still in the box, which needs to be installed. We have to drill a hole from upstairs, from the attic, all the way down to the first floor. UK would call it ground floor, which is something that I'm still coming to terms with. Americans call the ground floor the first floor, which means that what Americans call the second floor is what British people call the first floor. Don't ask me, I'm just getting used to it, and I've probably said the wrong words a couple of times now. Thanks to the amazing people who are scrolling by on my right. You can join them by clicking one of the links below. Also, thanks to our $50 and $100 a month Patreon supporters. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. We have installed professional grade network gear in a home, which is slightly bonkers, but when you consider the amount of content that we create every day, it kind of makes sense. We max out our 20 megabit per second internet connection most of the time, especially with a teenage daughter at home who's using social media and stuff. The nice thing about the new system is that it also allows me to packet shape a little bit. So my teenage daughter doesn't hog our entire internet connection. We can turn that down a little bit, which means if I have an important business meeting or my wife has an important business meeting, we can still use the internet. Roll on Starlink. If we do get Starlink, of course, we'll make a video on this channel about that. But until then, I hope you enjoy the rest of your holidays. I'll see you next year. Keep evolving.